Hello, everyone. This is Tracybrooker with the Creative Outcomes podcast. And today with me, first, this is a podcast about homeschooling, unschooling, self-directed learning. And today with me, I have a returning guest, Carl Russ. And Carl is known for unschooling schools. And I'll have him talk a little about yourself, Carl, for our new listeners. But we had Carl on before because Carl went back to teaching, and we were in this question of he just started there, and we were talking about kind of adding in some of the self-directed learning, unschooling in a classroom setting. So without further ado, please, Carl, just tell us a little bit about yourself for kind of the new listeners, and then let's talk about kind of brief recap of you joining back and what happened. What did you get from the experience?
Oh, sorry.
No worries. Go for it.
Yeah, I was a public school teacher and administrator for 30 years. I worked in Elkhart Community Schools, taught mostly sixth grade, but I taught second, fourth, fifth, and sixth at different times. And then I became assistant principal at the same school I'd spent a lot of my career at, and I did that for 7.5 years, and then I went on to run a alternative program for elementary kids, and that's kind of how I got introduced to the world of self-directed learning. And I think I talked about that last time, but I can talk about that again if people want me to. Then I was, they eliminated my position due to budget, and I decided to retire, and I started doing some work at Woodlawn Nature Center as education facilitator, and we ran a self-directed program there for a while until COVID. And then we kind of, everything, got put on hold for a while. Before I retired, I wrote a book, and that's what I was looking for to see where my copy is, but I wrote a book called Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn. And it's about how there's some things in regular school, conventional school, that I think people just kind of take for granted, which may not really make a whole lot of sense anymore. But we do it because it's a habit. Okay. So things like grouping kids by age, doing grades and testing and trying to justify that as saying, well, we need to know what kids know so we can plan the next thing, and coercive systems of behavior management, things like that. And so I wrote the book. I identified 9 areas that I think are worth taking a look at. And after that, kind of during COVID, and COVID was horrible, but also gave us some new things. I didn't know about Zoom before COVID, so wow. I met a lot of friends from all over the world that shared some of the same ideas that I have, and we formed a little group called Unschooling School, and there's a website, unschoolingschool.com, and people can go and look at that. And the idea of Unschooling School is taxpayers own the schools. Yep. Parents and even people that don't have kids own the schools because they pay taxes. Okay. So our theory is you have a right to ask for any kind of education you want from your local school. And you don't have to conform to all those things that they say you have to conform. And also just the idea that parents and kids have a lot of power, that they don't realize how much power they have. And teachers, administrators also, but kids can say no thank you. Yep. And it could be pretty rough seas to begin with, but I think the more and more people that start doing this, the more it's just going to become a thing. You know, it's just kids ask for what they want for, and parents say, we don't care about grades. We're not doing all this, all these assignments that you're giving. We're not doing all that because we think grades are meaningless. And maybe you do like grades, but the idea is you should be able to get the education you want from your local school. Correct. I started writing a new book called Subversive Sub, and my idea was I was going to go into schools as a sub and see what can I get away with, what kind of norms can I challenge, and
do they work?
Course, yeah, can you really do that? I mean, it's easy for me to sit here at home in my little study and cook up all this stuff and say, "Oh yeah, just go do this." And how would it be in real life? So the course that in the fall I subbed at my old school in sixth grade, and that particular class had not had a regular teacher since the fifth week of school. The teacher had started the year and then left, and they had never been able to replace him. And so they had a series of substitute teachers coming in and out, and I was one of them. And at the time that I did that, a lot of the kids asked me to come back, but I kind of wanted to experience more different assignments. And I also was told by the building secretary that they had somebody in place that was going to take the class. And I said, okay. I was tempted because one of the disadvantages of being a substitute teacher is you're there for a day or two.
Correct.
And then you're gone.
Correct.
And so how much change can you really affect? So I went on to do some other things. I actually had one class for 10 days with one of my former colleagues in the room next door, and that was really interesting too. So that was a little bit longer period of time. I was able to do more things in there. And then I got a call from the principal at the school that I worked at for a long time, and she said, I've been subbing in the class. We haven't been able to find anybody to take the class, so I've been doing it along with my administrative duties. And we were talking to the kids the other day, and they asked if I would call you if you would come back.
Wow.
Oh, wow, it's interesting.
Right.
I wonder what I did in one day. But one thing I did was, I think that they liked, I think they were used to being yelled at, and it's kind of a rowdy group of kids, and they tend to be on the boisterous side, talkative, and they can be disrespectful and rude, and so those are all things I'll talk about my experience. So I decided to go back, and she said, you can come in a couple days a week. And I said, no, if I'm going to do it, I want to do the whole thing. And I also told her, she knows me a little bit. And I said, it's not going to be normal.
Right.
You're not going to do things
status
too
quo
conventionally.
Right.
And she understood that. There were a couple things that she kind of required.
Correct.
I had to enter weekly grades into the grade book.
Right.
And what was the other thing? And of course, the testing, state testing, they do several different versions of tests. Although I was kind of weaseled my way out of that a little bit, as I can tell you about that too. But so I went back. January 27th was my first day. And then I was there mostly. I had a few times I wasn't there, but I was there until the end of May when school's over. And tried to experiment and experience what it was like to be kind of the little island of freedom in the middle of a lot of coercion.
Wow.
Wow.
So how many other kids wanted to come to the island?
Yeah, well, I had all the sixth graders because we did a rotation. Right. So I was technically social studies. I was teaching social studies. And I had 74. I think we lost a couple before the end of the year, but it was 74 when I started. Every day that we did rotations, there were some days we didn't, but they got an hour of freedom a day, and my homeroom had a little bit longer than that. So it was an interesting experiment. I think I think looking back on it, I'm not sure 4 months was long enough.
Right.
And also this age kid is a little difficult because they basically have the system for 6 years.
If not longer.
And they're used to that.
Right.
So whenever you do something that's a little bit different, you're fighting something that's well established.
Yeah.
And it's well established in the minds of everybody, even though the kids don't like it. It's what they're used to. And
well, it's been conditioned, and you and I had this discussion for those who haven't heard before, but this idea of what we call deschooling. And so, you're one part, small part of the bigger. So even this idea of having the sense of freedom, the brain's trying to, it is just a simple fact, right? The brain is a computer, and the brain is going, well, wait, how come we have to do, right? We've done the status quo for 6 years, 7, if they've done kindergarten or more. And then here comes this human, they're going to come in and give some freedom. And I could see, think about it. If the brain is used to do this, do this, do this, do this, stay quiet, don't move, all of these rules that we're supposed to follow at a very young age. And here comes this guy to go, let's have a little bit of freedom. There had to have been backlash. I'm curious. Even this almost sense of shock, bewilderment, like, what am I supposed to do? I think you and I talked about this before. You were talking about a particular student, is that some of their behaviors wanted to tell you the right answer because that's what the kids are taught. If I tell you what you want to hear, right, then they're still following the status quo. So, I'm curious, how were their behaviors? How were their reactions, especially, and did they get any better? Or I hate to use choice of words, better. Maybe did they relax more? Did they say, ooh, what is this? It's almost like an awakening.
Yeah. Well, whenever you're dealing with human beings, things are messy and complicated, right?
Yeah, right.
It's not neat and tidy like we would kind of like it to be sometimes.
Yeah.
But there were, obnoxious, rude, silly behavior continued. I think a lot of times kids mix up because we do it to them. They don't understand the difference between respect and fear.
Yeah. Oof.
So if they're not afraid,
that's
then
so clear,
they think they can be disrespectful.
That is so clear, Carl.
Yeah.
And I think anyone I've known has said it, but being in a classroom situation, that's very clear, because I think fear, right. What are they afraid of versus this is, yeah. Wow.
So I had, and I'm a human being too. That's the other factor. I'm not a robot or an android or anything. So I would have to continually remind myself what I was trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to give them a space where they can be themselves. And I had to remind myself that all the time because I would catch myself kind of falling back into teacherly habits.
Yep.
If you don't do this, this is going to happen type of thing. Instead of just being a human being and say, I have a problem when you yell. I don't like it when you talk like this.
Yeah.
And it seems like a slight shift, but it's really kind of a major shift because when you're coming in as an authority figure and you're saying this behavior is not allowed, and some law somewhere, carved in the side of a mountain says you can't do this.
Right.
Is different from me saying it's too noisy in here for me.
Yeah.
That's a difference. And so The thing that's interesting, and this has happened to me every time I've done this. So I did, before we started our self-directed program for alternative kids, we did a 6-week pilot in the middle of elementary school. And over the 6 weeks, outrageous behaviors declined, and there were more calm and more taking just ownership of my own space and my own whatever work I'm doing. And when we did then the next year we had a whole year, and from the beginning to the end of the year, you can see a remarkable difference.
Yeah.
In the calmness, the respect the kids were giving each other.
Wow.
And so the next year was the same thing. And actually that second year, we had some of the same kids, a core group. So it was even better. We started off, and you're right. It's hard not to use the word better.
Right.
It's just a different feeling. And if you ever get a chance to visit a democratic free school or a agile learning center, anything like that, I think the first thing you'll notice is how calm it is and how happy the kids are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of energy going on, but it's just a different kind of thing than you see a lot of times. If you can be a fly in the wall in a public school or any conventional school, there's a lot more anxiety, tension, fear, adults being stern and, lecturing kids.
Yeah, because it completely goes against the norm. Even when, as a parent of 2 unschoolers and a lot of my friends who unschooled, the biggest, it's the reversal. So the biggest complaint is, well, I think I need to go to school, or, my one son goes, well, I should have went to a regular school. And I always said to him, sign you up tomorrow. And then what happened was when he started to see what was happening, he had friends who did go to school. He didn't like the outcomes. He didn't see what he was seeing in schools. No. In the irony, it's no different than as an adult, like you were talking about. So then adulthood happens. And now he's in this place of, I need to get a job, right? Because we're going against the norm. I need to, I don't know if I should be doing my passion. I should just be getting. So whether they're in school, going against the norm, mm-hmm. or whether we're homeschooling or whether they're becoming adults, right? It's tough when the brain is viewing what is happening in the outside world, even though you know that going against the norm makes you a little happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's struggles.
So, I was, for the book that I'm writing, I tried every couple of days to just do like a journal entry and write about things. And I think at one point I wrote that we really have made a lot of progress, but it's hard to see that when you're involved in the day-to-day
right.
hustle and bustle and just the interactions that you have with kids. Well, the interesting thing about that too, because sometimes kids would complain about the lack of content to the mm-hmm. class. They would say, you don't teach us anything. And I would kind of react just like you did with your son and say, well, we can start doing that anytime you want to. Right. You want to do the textbook thing? I said I did it for years. I know how to do it. I can we can get the textbook out, we can read, we can do assignments. And they never wanted to do that. It was funny. I gave them the option. Let me know. And even for individual kids, I would say, if you want to do this, I think I actually did tell a kid one time, page whatever, a couple pages in the book, and I said, answer the questions. The thing is, it's interesting because my theory is maybe older kids that are really, really conditioned would still feel the need to do that. But I think a lot of kids, if you take away the penalty.
Yeah.
Well, see, the interesting thing about a group of average kids who are all different, some of them are not doing the work anyway.
Right.
So when I would look at kids' grades, except in the area I was responsible for, I would see a lot of kids that were failing because they just hadn't turned in a lot of work.
Right.
We're just missing work, a lot of missing work. So some of them are already not doing the work. The ones that are doing it, when you take the penalty away, I think it would be hard to get anybody to do a textbook if you take the penalty away.
Yeah.
Unless they have a specific need, something they really need to learn, like driver's manual or something like that, then that probably makes a lot of sense. But
well, I have a question on that real quick. So how did you grade them? Because obviously requirement was a grade. You have, what did that look like? Then were there assignments? And then, share real quick.
Yeah, well, so what I did, I kind of changed it as I went along. And so what I did was, at the beginning, I just kind of put the dilemma out to the group, and I said, I don't really like grades. If I was given a choice, I wouldn't give grades, but they're required. Although looking back on it, I'm not sure if anybody was really checking.
Right.
But anyway, that's what I was told. So I said, what are we going to do about this? And so we came up with a point system, because one of the things that some of the kids really enjoyed doing were presentations. And so I kind of structured the class. The very beginning, we did journaling. And again, that kind of changed as time went by, but I wanted to have kind of a structure, some kind of a structure. So we did journaling, and that was worth 10 points if you wrote something or drew a picture. And then presentations, when I started, I had my presentation. I always did a little presentation. I did my presentation first. And then in one of the rotations, especially, they loved to do them so much that we were running out of time. We didn't have enough time for all the kids. So I decided I'm going to put the kids first. We'll do journaling, then kids presentation, then I'll go last. And so if anybody gets left out, it'd be me. And that was worth, if you did a presentation, that was worth 25 points. And so we had points for things. And if you did a project, that was worth 50 points or something. And so for a while there, I just tallied the points. And then I said, okay. And then I wrote them on kind of a chart paper, and I said, here's the low, and here's the high. And it was ranged from like, I don't know if anybody had 0 points, but it was like 25 points all the way up to 500 points. And I said, so how should we do this? How should we do the grades? And I said, first of all, I'm not giving any Fs. I don't believe anybody's a failure.
Right.
I'm not giving anybody an F. So there is no F on here. And I think on the first grade scale, we did have a D. So we had some points, and then we just kind of divided it up. And this was really confusing for them because they looked at the 500 and they kept thinking, well, they were especially confused about the 100-point level, because that was like a C or something. And they're like, wait a minute, 100 points is supposed to be an A. And I said, no, that's 100%. This is points. But they had a real hard time figuring that out, because to them 100 was an A plus. 100 is an A plus.
Got it.
So we did this, and then I entered those grades into the computer. And I think I did that the second week. And then I started thinking, this is I'm still giving points out, even though there weren't really any assignments. The projects were anything you wanted to do a project about, and the presentation you could present about anything. So I had, especially the third rotation, they would just kind of get up there and do stand-up comedy, basically.
Love it.
They didn't really have the middle group was kind of the high achievement group, so they did a lot of slideshows about all kinds of things, basketball players. One girl eventually got to the point where she was doing karaoke, basically. She would put up a karaoke version of a show tune, and she would get up and sing and dance around and stuff. So that was all, it was kind of all up to them. I didn't really give them any. We talked about a lot of possibilities, and we were always talking about, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. and I tried to show them some examples. And then I started also realizing I'm missing out on some key things here, because there's all kinds of communication going on that's not really being recorded. So I started going around with a list. I had a list of kids on the clipboard, and I would just make myself a little, I would put down the abbreviation. So if they were on their iPad, I would put an I. If they were talking to their friends, I would put a C for communicating. If they were reading a book, which didn't happen real often, I would put something. And then if they did a presentation, I would put a notation what the presentation was. And so I have these sheets with all this stuff written down. At the end of the week, I would kind of look at that. And for a while, I was still doing the point thing. And then I thought, I can just look at this sheet.
Right.
And this kid's got a whole bunch of things going on. This kid didn't do very much. So, and then I also, later on, I started giving them a reflection sheet at the end of the week. It was the weekly reflection and grade sheet. So I listed some things at the top, like journaling, projects, talking to my friends, and they could check those off, and they could also fill something in, and then they gave themselves a grade. And in most cases, I never lowered their grade. In a couple cases, I bumped it up a little bit, because they would say they were C+, and I'd say, no, I don't think you're really a C+.
Right.
So that grading was really interesting. Then we did have a final project that you could have called it an assignment, but I kind of recast it and call it an invitation.
Nice.
So there really isn't any penalty if you don't do it.
Right.
The only penalty would be, and if I was going to go back again, I might rethink this a little bit, but the only penalty was, if you really want the A, you probably need to do this.
So it gave you points, though.
Yeah.
So in this realm of 500, it added to your points.
Yeah.
Got it.
So everything you did counted.
Yeah.
So if you're drawing a picture, if you're talking to your friend, and sometimes I'd ask them, what are you doing? And they would tell me, and I would write it down. But, I never really required everybody to do the same thing at the same time. And even the final project could be anything related to social studies, which is basically anything.
And
so
go ahead.
I had 2 boys do, their final project was on Lil Nas X, the rapper, the gay rapper.
Uh-huh.
And some people did more traditional subjects, but they were free to do whatever they wanted, any topic they wanted to, and some didn't do anything. So, what were you going to say?
Well, my first question is so number one, the kids participated and helped you figure out this grading system. So, what was the response from teachers, administrators, as far as your grading? How are you doing this? I'm curious. Even parents.
Yeah, I had a parent message me that they didn't understand why their son was getting a grade. I think his overall grade was a B- or something. And they didn't understand why some of the weekly grades were C's. And they said he didn't understand it either. And so I just kind of responded that he hadn't really come to me and said he was concerned about his grade, first of all. And kind of explained the process that we were using. And so then he did come to me after that and said, I want to get an A in your class. What do I need to do?
Wow.
Kind of told him. But that was really the only reaction I got from parents. Other teachers didn't. I don't know if they were aware of what I was doing, or I never really got any comments about that. And I didn't get any from administrators.
That's good.
I did kind of reach a little bit of a crisis point, and I'd have to look back on my journal to find out where it was. But it just seemed like the kids were fighting me. They weren't my days were just kind of crazy, and I thought, why am I doing this? Putting myself through this every day, and they don't seem to really appreciate what I'm doing. Maybe they wouldn't be that concerned if I didn't. So I said, I just went to the kids and I said, I don't have to be here.
Mm-hmm.
I can stay home. I'm doing this because I wanted to, be a help, or I wanted to be a help to you guys. But if I'm not being helpful, I just stay home. And and I also went to the administration. I went to my teachers that were on my 6th grade team, and I kind of said to them, is this working for you? I mean, am I causing more trouble than I'm worth? And everybody wanted me to stay. The comments from teachers and administrators was more along the lines, the kids love you, they love your class, but they're taking advantage of you. And I thought, that's an odd way to phrase it. They're taking advantage because you're so nice and you're so kind and everything, that they're not behaving properly, basically. And so that was kind of the reaction. I felt like as time went on, a little bit of what I was doing kind of rubbed off on them a little bit. Not a lot. I don't know what it would be like if I was there from the beginning of the year to the end.
Right.
But nobody really complained, other than there was a lady there. The building had a permanent sub, and this lady had been the sub in the room I was teaching in for a period of time, and the kids drove her nuts, and she drove the kids nuts. They didn't like her. They felt like she was unfair, that she wasn't genuine. There's some things that she did that they described to me which weren't real professional. But whenever she had the class because I was sick or because I had something I had to do, she would complain about the whole thing,
Because she probably felt like, I had them under control, and now they're even more out of control. Yeah.
Well, somewhat, but then she also would say, they acted like this when I was in the room too. So I thought, well, then what's the difference? It's no worse than it was, certainly.
Right.
I think by the end, I noticed when they would come in and they would kind of get into their, whatever the thing they were going to be doing for that day, it was calmer than the beginning. And there was less behavior that I had to intervene with. But I had to constantly remind myself again, what are you here for? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
And it is working.
And it does work.
It does work.
But, it's no different than, like I said, myself as a parent going, oh my gosh, what did I do? We blame ourselves, number one, and I remind my son of this. The brain always wants to go to the negative. It's a proven scientific fact. The brain always wants to go to the negative first versus the positive. Look what I'm doing. And that's why we always have to fight to try to find the good in something. You're talking about, again, going back to 7+ years of conditioning, a negative type of environment, showing a little bit of light. I mean, it's like I said, it's like, as much as we want all these kids to come out of the cave, right? There's the sun. This is freedom. This is great. The truth is it might be really scary. It goes against everything their brain has been taught in the last 7+ years, especially too. Remember, I am a true believer. most parents have been raised through a conditional system, so they raise their children based upon that. So even when they leave you and go home, there's still restrictions, rules, penalties. You know what I'm saying? And so I can only imagine not just the students, but yourself and the experience, because you do. I don't know how many times I'm like, well, you guys could go to school. This is okay. And what am I doing? And am I screwing my kids up? And I will share, though, ultimately, the payoff is big. And and my friends and I who chose to unschool, and my kids did a little bit of school, don't get me wrong. It comes down to relationship building. I tell everyone that I work with, even unschoolers that I work with, they're special ed kids. I'm an advocate for them, this and that. It brings up your stuff more than it does the kids, because we're old. We've been conditioned more than they have. And again, we're going against the norm. And so all of our brain chatter wants to come up. I mean, it's going to come up, and you just got to say to yourself, it's coming up. This is my stuff. Am I doing it wrong? And you're like, and it's tough because we get all that from our own schooling, our own parents, all the conditional systems. And it's just mind chatter. But the truth is, here's the facts. You notice more calm, right? I'm assuming relationships, respect, even if may not be with the kids, I bet improved a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I like to do, I like to survey. So when I started in January, I gave the kids, the very first day, I gave them a survey. And the one question that was repeated, I did this 3 times. Once at the beginning, once in the middle, and once at the end. And the one question I did not change, I changed some of the stuff on the survey, but the one question I didn't change was, let me see. Actually, if you let me share,
please,
I can show you.
Okay.
And this is not really a scientific study because I didn't have a control group. Ideally, and maybe I'll do this sometime, and if I find myself in the right situation. Okay, if I was working in a school where I was teaching my way and the teacher next door was teaching conventionally, then if they were open to it, I would survey both groups and see how it changed over the year. But so okay, so on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how would you rate your experience this year? And the first time I took it, January 27th, these were the results.
Okay.
So, and this was April, this is March. So let me go back a minute. So the most common answer was a 4. And the range is kind of here in the middle between 4 and 8. And then in March, the most common answer is a 7. And there's it's moving. You can see the range is moving to this side.
Gotcha.
And then this was at the end of the year.
Wow.
So in January, the mean was 5.75, March 6.71, and May 7.21. And the median and the mode. Yep. So all the measures went up.
Excellent.
So, I mean, the thing that you'd have to ask yourself, though, is this common to 6th grade? Maybe all 6th graders start off in January feeling kind of, right. And then as you go on, maybe their attitude gets better. But I think that's a pretty dramatic change. The other thing that probably you'd have to factor into this too is the idea that I was the most consistent person.
Right. They've had, correct.
They had people off and on for periods of time, but I was the one that stuck the longest. So when we did this similar question in when I was running my Elkhart Elementary Academy program, and we surveyed them at the beginning and the end. I don't remember if we did a middle. Maybe I did a middle too. But the question was somewhat different. It was how do you feel about school? Because we had kids from first grade all the way up to sixth grade, intermingled. So, and consistently saw when they started our program and they reflected back on their past school experience, which would have been conventional.
Right.
The marks were all low. And at the end of the year, when they experienced what we did, which was basically self-directed, with the exception of testing, we were required to do state testing. The attitudes changed a lot. But you're right. Relationship building is very important.
So let's go to that question of state testing. You did bring that up. You're like, so you had to do state testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you were doing student-led learning, self-directed learning. What did that look like? Because I'm sure that's a question a lot of teachers have who come to Unschool schools.
Yeah, well, when we did our the academy program, we did a state test once a year in the spring. And we didn't really pay a lot of attention to that one, but what we kind of looked at was the NWEA testing, which we give 3 times a year. And the first year that we ran the program, from the beginning scores to the ending scores, we had like 21 kids, I think, that were consistently there for a longer period of time. We got a couple at the end of the year, which I didn't count. Their average, they all improved in reading. Well, not all. So we had 19 kids improve in reading, and we beat the average. So in NWEA, there's a expected growth, and we were higher than the expected growth. In math, I think it was 18 out of 20 or 17 out of 20 improved and beat the average. The second year we did it, we saw the same thing, same kind of results. Kids that had been with us the longest showed the most improvement, which seems really weird because we had no required classes. So we didn't teach reading, we didn't teach math. Kids did what they wanted to do. So the day consisted mostly of video games, YouTube, playing outside, playing tag, skateboarding, riding bikes. And they did a lot of park visits. We would go to parks and they would hike and, do what you do at the park. So the only kind of consistent curricular thing we had was a morning meeting where sometimes we would show video. And a lot of times it would be we would show something and then the kids started asking, like they got into a kick for a while. They were really interested in Greek mythology. So there's all those little Greek mythology cartoons on YouTube.
Right.
And so every day we'd watch another Greek mythology cartoon. But, as far as requiring them to do any work, we didn't. Every once in a while, a parent would get kind of concerned and upset, and they would make a deal with the kid. You have to do this much work. You have to do some worksheets or whatever every day. And the only thing we told the parent was, we're not going to police that. You can come to any deal you want to with your kid, but we're not going to call you up or we're not going to rat on them if they don't do it. And usually the kid didn't do it, or it didn't last very long. But they improved. And so that's where I kind of developed this theory of the brain as a muscle and you exercise it. So, the other thing I forgot to say about the day, so it wasn't just video games and YouTube, it was tons of conversations. That was the big thing that I think we did a lot. So Kids talk to kids, kids talk to adults talk to each other. It was a constant conversation, and that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that we make in conventional school is try to get the kids not to talk. Yeah. Because that's really, you're exercising your language muscle. And so
yes. And so let me tell you, I'm a deaf teacher, right? And deaf students need language. That's what they have, a difficult time with language. So we need that constant conversation because it exercises, right, the receptive and the expressive part of the brain. Yeah. Yeah.
So in the math part, I theorized that when you're out riding a bike or you're skateboarding or you're building something in Minecraft, you're exercising that math muscle. They would organize these really weird tag games with all these interesting rules and things. And so I think it's just, there's something about,
Wow.
to me, it's a difference between learning arithmetic and learning to think mathematically.
Correct.
So you can learn all the arithmetic in the world and not be able to think mathematically.
Right.
So,
well, I mean, that's just like, I'll tell you a quick conversation. My husband and I were very close friends of ours. Their daughter was doing economics. And my husband goes, well, why are you taking that? She goes, oh, it's for graduation. And so he goes, so like, have they talked about credit cards, interest rates? She goes, no. Mm-hmm. And he's like, that's a life skill when you're going to go away to college and things like that. And so there are then two of those conversations, these basic things. We have this textbook and all this information, but it really means nothing. All it means to her is I have to know this, pass a test so I can graduate. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so let me tell you some of the interesting things that we came up with at school. I kind of came up with some ideas, and some of them were really great. Some of them didn't go very far. But the one thing I decided to was to offer to all the teachers in the building, we called it community service. So sixth graders will come to your class and help you out.
Yeah, we had some.
And we make a schedule.
Huge. Yep.
And kids love that. Not everybody, but a lot of the kids love to do that. And the teachers liked it. But the interesting thing was I could only schedule it during my time.
Right.
Because the other teachers were like, well, they can't miss reading or math. They have to be there. Okay. So it made some difficulties when our schedules were somewhat flexible and they would change a little bit. But that's one thing we did. The other thing we did was we started a school newspaper. And it was totally voluntary. Just, if you want to take some pictures, you want to write a news story, interview. And it went okay for a while. I think we put out 3 issues, and the 4th issue they just weren't interested anymore in doing that. But they did that for a while. So those were a couple things that we did that I thought were really, because the thing is, if you are working at a school that's run democratically and is free, it's basically open and free. One of the advantages of that situation is kids aren't forced to be in a room with somebody that they don't really get along with.
Right.
Conventional school, you have very little say, if any, who you're in the room with. The teachers make a list, and then you go to this place, and so kids really need to move around, and to me, it'd be much better if they could just go to the library or go wherever.
Right.
But, we have this thing in conventional school that we have to keep our eyes on people, and they have to be in a certain place at a certain time. And so I was able to explode that just a little bit by letting them go out and do things. And the newspaper, too, they would go around and interview people. But that was one of the things I really struggled with, was this idea of, we have to confine this 25 kids in this room during this time, and we can't conceive of doing something different with that. I think I came to the conclusion at the end that you can do some self-directed ed in the middle of a conventional school.
Okay.
It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be creative, and you have to pick your battles, because there's some things that you're just not going to be successful in changing. And but it could be done. It'd be nice if there was more than one person doing it.
Right. Well, I have a question for you. So, big question. Are you going back? What's the final result as far as you, or, and if you're not, like, just expand. If you are, why not? So share.
Well, I think I probably will continue to do some substitute teaching. I think if the right situation came along, I think it would be interesting to do what I did with a younger group of kids over a longer period of time.
Right. Stay with the same kids. That would be.
If I could get a regular teaching job, and with the principal and other administrators understanding I guess I give them my book and say, please read this before you make a final decision.
Right.
If that were possible, I would consider it. It just would have to be I think it would have to be the right situation.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to do that. If I could start from the beginning of school. One time when I was teaching, I did a 3-year loop. So I started with kids in 4th grade, and the same core group stayed with me for 3 years. And that was really pretty cool. So even if I could find something like that, so I don't know. It's a possibility. I know I was really tired at the end of the day. It was,
yeah.
The way the 6th grade day was structured, once they, at about 1:10 in the afternoon, they went to their special classes, music, art, phys ed. And a lot of times I went home then because that was the end of the day. So the special teacher was dismissing them anyway. If I had to stay all the way till 3 o'clock, I don't know. That would be kind of tough.
Interesting.
But I think a younger group over a longer period maybe would be interesting to try. The other thing that I would really like to do, and I don't know that this job exists, I really would like to find a principal that was open to doing things differently and let me be the coach.
Mm-hmm.
So to him or her, and to the teachers, and just see, or, if they offered me a building, which I do still have my building administrator's license, that would be interesting to me too, because I think what I would do then is I would try to treat the staff the same way that I would treat a class of kids and say, we're not all in the same place, but I want you to think about what you do every day. What part of it do you really love and think really works? And do more of that. And what do you use not so sure? You don't think, maybe you don't like giving spelling tests and you don't think they're worthwhile, then don't do it. And the other thing I would say to them is forget about the test. We have to take it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. I encourage you not to talk about it that much. And if you do, this is my testing speech that I gave the kids this year. To me, standardized testing is like a video game. You figure out the rules, get the high score, and then it doesn't change anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just figure the rules and get a high score. And that's what it is. It's a game.
Yeah.
So I tell that to the teachers, look, it doesn't mean anything. And I would probably give everybody a copy of my book and say, we'll talk about a chapter every month at our staff meeting, but I'm not going to require you to do what I said in this book. But I want you to be aware that it's a possibility.
I mean, Carl, as just we're sitting here talking, to me, it would be a center that would just I think every researcher should be there in this discussion of language alone. I would come and, because you're going to have kids with special needs. We should be studying that, if they're not going to get, we'll say, therapy for a choice of words. Do things improve? Do they improve gradually? versus they have to get here and we have to keep improving. Can we just allow them to be? So we do pre and post tests. It would be endless. And I would be so curious to see all the outcomes from that, not just that. I think the most important outcome with everything we're dealing with teen and child suicides right now, how are they emotionally? And my goodness, I think that alone, I used to tell my husband, you were talking about the whole taxpayer thing. And I love that you mentioned that is, wouldn't it be funny if kindergartners surveyed their teachers since their parents are paying taxes? Because if the teacher's not doing their job, you're out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's again giving kids the voice. That's what free and democratic learning is, and they should be able. But see, we're teaching children where they're figures of authority, and we're not supposed to do that. And yeah, Carl, I think that would be great. I mean, put it out there.
Yeah, if there's any superintendents out there that want me to come, I even bring my little camper and out to Arizona or wherever, and
I think
it'd be worth it to try something for a while and then see. I think that we think it would work. Yep. I'm not sure if other people are convinced that haven't experienced it.
So I will tell you, here in Tucson, I think it's high school, and it might be more than high school. So it's an school, right? Self-directed learning school. And then there's another one, interestingly enough. So it's called Highlands. I actually spoke with the original designer. And so it's a free school, free and democratic school. If they'll do curriculum, it's considered charter, so they're mandated on state testing. And, I don't know if you guys have this where you're at, but we have the grading system now for the actual school. So, we're an A+ school, right? And because he does just one-on-one with the kids and not mandatory, like, okay, if you want to, we'll do math. And so they don't make it group stuff. The kids are really successful and the school is doing awesome. That I laughed going, maybe we should bring one up here. And it's a total, free and democratic school, and it's incredible. But yeah. They're out there, but yeah.
Well, and you mentioned emotional health, mental health, and that really should be the main focus of what we're doing.
Right.
Mental and physical well-being should be on top of everything else. And so, even if you're running conventional curriculum, it should not trump emotional. Right. So
well-being, absolutely.
So
I'll share this. Share this. My girlfriend is a nurse at the one big high schools here. And she said, here's the top 3. Anxiety, because post-COVID, kids are worried they're going to have to go to war. And they're afraid of nuclear war right now with everything going on. And the environment. And she said anxiety is number 1. But those are the thoughts that are hit, especially seniors graduating. Am I going to have to go to war? Is there going to be a nuclear war? The environment's really bad. Now, how could I even make a difference in this? So these are real life situations that we pretend don't exist in the minds of children, but it is on their minds. And they're scared to death, just every day. So yeah, creating a school that puts mental well-being first. And it's, we say again, though, unfortunately, I think we go to the brain is empty until filled. So I have to teach you well-being. I have all these people, I'm a very spiritual person. We just need to put yoga in school. Mm-hmm. I'm the devil's advocate. What if they don't want to do it?
Yeah.
There's going to be kids in there going, I don't want to sit here.
Right.
Oh, we do things like walking yoga. I'm going, I know there's a kid in there. Are you okay with just letting him be? Or is it a passive aggressiveness that we're going to make him do what I tell him to do? So, I mean, we just have to be clear. And I think what you're saying, if kids are calmer in a self-directed classroom, if relationships are building, if there are conversations happening, what could be the end result? I think you have a grant someplace in there, Carl, to get you going.
Yeah. Well, you brought up a really good point. We always think in school that we have to teach something.
Yeah.
So yes, we're going to have well-being is going to be a topic.
Right.
Well, it's kind of like math or reading being a topic. I think our little experiment shows that the other things, you can live it.
Yeah.
You can live
present.
well-being.
Yes.
You can live well-being.
Yes,
Don't
yes.
teach it.
Yeah.
And
kids are clear. We're clear. Kids are clear. You're going to try to teach me something. Oh God, here comes something else.
Yeah.
They're clear. Stop pretending that they don't know what they want and they can't see things. They know what's going on. We had a behavior modification program at the one school that I started with, originally designed for at-risk kids. Decided we're going to bring that in. Every kid, the first thing they said is, I'm so glad I'm out of this school. I mean, teachers were convinced all it was positive and negative reinforcement. I don't care how you put it. Kids were aware. They knew how to behave to get the points. Mm-hmm. There was nothing good just about being. Why can't they just be okay with themselves?
Yeah.
Instead of being judged.
Yeah. Well, and it's clear that punishments and rewards don't change behavior long term.
Yep.
They may affect some kids' behavior for a short term, but it doesn't make a change because you're not changing the reasons the behavior exists.
Yeah.
That really comes out the end of the school year because some of the tools of coercion kind of go away. The grades are basically done. Testing's done. You're not learning anything else. I mean,
interesting. Yeah, that's funny.
You're not learning because we're not teaching. So we came up with some interesting things. Kids got to choose some activities, and we did some contests and some games and things that kids were doing. And it was interesting to see the teachers think a little differently at the end of the year.
That's good.
I don't know what the future holds exactly.
Well, if I was a betting woman, I would say, Carl, you're not done yet, whether it's in this school or another school or coaching. You definitely are here with a purpose. I am so glad you came to be a part of my podcast and that we could share this with teachers, parents, administrators. Guys, this stuff works. It really works. And again, on June 13th, if we're still having this conversation about mental well-being, correct? Why can't we just start here? It's easy. It's simple. Yeah. Carl, how could people get a hold of you?
Well, I mean, carlruss57 at Gmail. Okay. If you go to the Unschooling School website, I think my picture's on. If you want more help, there's a way to contact me through that. And I'm happy to do these kind of conversations. Unschooling School even offers, depends where you are geographically, but one of us will go with you to the school, either virtually like this or in person if we live close enough to where you are. If you want to have a discussion with school and you don't know that you feel confident to ask for what you want, we are available to do those kind of things, consult with homeschoolers or people that want to unschool school. We're looking for brave families that want to say, hey, We're just going to say no.
Yeah.
Here's our list of things we're saying no to, and we're okay with these things, but we don't want this. And we have a couple terms on the website. One is called an enlightened educator, who, if you run into someone like that, they may go, that's interesting. Tell me more. And we also have what we call responsible subversives, who will allow these things to occur without any hubbub or any, arguments.
Right.
Those are probably in the minority right now. So you go into school and you say, my son's not going to do any more spelling tests. At first they may say, oh no, he has to, everybody has to do that. But if you're persistent and stick to it, and I mean, obviously, one thing I like to say too is everybody's already self-directed, they just don't know it. So
Great.
when you give a class the assignment, okay, read chapter 7, and I'm sitting there with the book up in front of me, but I'm drawing pictures, I'm being self-directed.
That's correct.
And even if I read the chapter, I decided to read that chapter, you told me to, but I agree.
Choice. Yeah.
What we don't always understand is that you can refuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to read that book. I'm going to read this book. The other interesting thing, there's this whole movement now to ban certain books, and kids can't read this book or that book. And our state legislator almost passed a law. They didn't quite do it, where it would require consulting with families before you. So they would have to approve the curriculum.
Yeah.
But see, self-directed takes care of all that.
Yep.
Because you don't force a curriculum on anybody. You can read that book if you want to, but you don't have to read that book. So that kind of is an interesting way that sometimes this maybe sounds like hippy dippy liberal stuff, and it's really can be real conservative too, because if you're kind of a libertarian and you don't want people interfering, that's what self-directed education is. Yep. Kids and families making their own decisions about what they want to learn, how and when and with who they want to learn it. So we're available. Unschooling School. We have for some reason, we have a lot of Canadians in the group. We have one guy in England, Derry Hannum, and a couple of people in the States. So we're happy to help out with families that want to try it. We even got forms on the Unschooling School website you can fill out. We have what we call a self-directed learner IEP.
Perfect. I love it. So
you fill it out exactly what you want and you don't want. And just like a regular special ed IEP, you take it to school and say, this is what we want you to do.
Love it.
So school can be different. It really can be different. It doesn't have to be the way it is. And sometimes we think that it was, conventional schooling's only been around for a little over 100 years. It's kind of a new thing, really, in the history of mankind. We did self-directed learning a long time before we ever did school.
That's correct.
So it really is. And that's why I try to avoid saying traditional school, because traditionally people were self-directed.
Well, absolutely. They weren't forced to go to school. Most kids worked on their farms, They learned from each other. That's what everyone brings up Horace Mann. And I don't know if you've really dove into him, but you have to think like him. So he was raised on a farm his whole life. And then he would go to the library to teach himself. So we already have a self-directed learner, right? So then he goes to college. So still never stepped in a school, goes to college. His first experience is college, right? And he's taught himself all these things. And then what does he learn? He learns education. What does he say? Everyone needs to be doing this. So I kind of laugh about it because he was just a self-directed learner who followed his passions, right? And then said, oh yeah, we all need to be doing that. And I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, that is funny.
Anyways, all right. So I just want to say thank you, Carl, for joining us today. Please, especially if you're a teacher administrator, consider what we talked about today. Reach out to Carl. And if you're a parent, knowing your rights, even if you're curious, reach out to Carl. He's just an amazing person with all these resources, information to share with you. This is about change. This is about well-being. And this is about, self-directed learning. So thank you, Carl. By the way, for everyone, we are on season 2. So this will be, one of our first podcasts up there. So check that out. And if you need to get a hold of me, go to my website, tracybrooker.com. And Carl will be up there. I already have it posted. I'll just do a little link to, if you want to listen to the podcast again or share with your friends. Also, this will be on YouTube. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and take care. Thanks for listening to the Creative Outcomes podcast. And if you'd like to learn more, go to my website at tracybrooker.com.